Happy New Year's, Utah football fans. And with the arrival of the new year, it means it's officially time for the 2023 Rose Bowl. It's game day. We're talking all things Utes versus the Nittany Lions on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Appreciate all of you who have helped us reach over 850 subscribers now on YouTube. You guys can interact with us in the YouTube comments or on social media. You can follow me at JT Wistrcill or at Locked On Utes. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, we're going to be talking about what to expect at a game day from the Utes taking on Penn State this afternoon. Also, the coaching matchup in this one, James Franklin taking on Kyle Whittingham, and a couple bold predictions to close it out. And in order to do that, we have someone live from Pasadena. It's our friend Josh Furlong of KSL.com. And Josh, when talking about this game, I think we've just been talking and waiting for it for so long. It's so great for it to finally be here. And I know you've had the opportunity to talk with some of the players too. I can't even imagine how amped up these guys are and ready to go, because it's the reason guys like Cam Rising, so many of these players came back, is to have an opportunity to win another Rose Bowl. And that opportunity is finally here today.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the players are kind of all business mode, right? Like, they're having fun. There's been a lot of different things that they can do it's been kind of take their mind off of the game. But a lot of the players that I've talked to is, last year they say it was their fun time. This year is the time to win. So it's interesting to kind of see that mindset from them. It's very much so business-like and kind of getting them ready for what that bowl game is going to be.
Something I talked about a lot throughout the past week is how last year really did feel like it was a great opportunity for Utah, and they obviously showed up ready to go. But even though they lost the game, it felt like it was such a win in terms of for the program overall. Obviously, the players didn't take it that way. They were very frustrated and wanted this opportunity to come back. But it does seem like it is kind of a different Aurora just from the things I've seen coming out of Pasadena in this one. And I think, Josh, one of the other things I'm curious to ask you about is you obviously have been covering this team for a few years now, and looking at this, just the position they're in to win a Rose Bowl, their second consecutive Pac-12 championship, their second time playing in this game. Are you surprised that they're in this position, or did you feel like this was always something that under the guidance of Kyle Whittingham, this program was going to reach?
Maybe not like the status that it is right now, right? I mean, I think we always saw that Kyle was building something. It was gradual. It wasn't like a USC where you're just going to throw a bunch of cash and a bunch of transfer portal people in and build something. This is something that Kyle's been trying to build the right way and trying to build it in a way that would be sustainable. So, from that standpoint, I don't know if we all expected them, especially 10 plus years outside of the Mountain West Conference, that they'd be in this position. But I think where they're at right now, I think it is become the expectation, right? Like, before the season started, I think the Rose Bowl was definitely a destination that they thought that they could get to. And although the season, maybe didn't start out that way and it didn't work out the way that they had hoped, they still managed a way to get here and find a way to do it. So, look, I think this is kind of the expectations. I don't think a New Year's Six is the bar that people have to clear every year to be able to do that. But I think you're going to start seeing this as more of the kind of the destination that Utah is aiming for every single year and hoping to get to. And once the 12-team playoffs expands, I mean, I think that kind of changes things as well. So I think this is kind of where they're at. You're seeing that from the fan base. Everybody's kind of looking at this as kind of their expectations. And so trying to go back to, an 8-win season doesn't necessarily feel like a great spot anymore.
Yeah, it has definitely. The bar feels like it has been raised, and it's because of the contributions of guys like Clark Phillips and Dalton Kincaid, who, of course, won't be playing in the Rose Bowl. Difficult losses for both sides. When it comes to first looking at how you replace Dalton, I think it's very similar to the Pac-12 championship game for the Utes, where Dalton was a part of that victory, but it wasn't the first time they saw USC where him and Cam literally put the team on their back, basically, and carried them to a win. It was more like just a contribution from Dalton as he converted a couple third downs the team needed to. But I mean, I think if he had that touchdown touchdown drop that Jalen Dixon had to scoop up there too. So I feel like offensively, it's really going to have to be a by committee thing for this Utah team. We expect Devon Vele to be back up to strength, I believe, last I checked. So should be a guy too that Cam still has at least one of his guys out there. And then defensively, I feel like Sione Vaki is the guy I'm really looking at to step up on the outside, while Zamiah Vaughn and JT Broughton take on the top matchups on the outside. But with Penn State being down Parker Washington, as well as their top defensive back in Joey Porter Jr., feels like both these teams are down some guys, but both of them, being the talented programs they are, have the players necessary to replace and fill in for those talented players.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where, it's the true definition of what Utah likes to preach of next man up, right?
Mhm.
And I think, they feel much better about it this year than they did last year, right? Like you go through your cornerback depth last year and you're pulling a guy over like Mekhi Bernard to a running back to be able to play corner. That's not necessarily the case this year. Now, that doesn't mean that the production of, a Brant Keithy or a Clark Phillips or a Dalton Kincaid won't be missed in this game. It's just more Utah's been able to kind of absorb the hits a little bit more. They've built to this in their recruiting. Going back to that question that you asked earlier, this is what Kyle's been building to, right? Like in years past, it was like you lose a guy like Clark Phillips in to go to the NFL draft for this bowl game, and that's huge. That ends maybe your opportunity as a defense. Now, it's not that can't be a worry, but you've got guys that they can step in. So, I mean, on the tight end side, you got Thomas Yasmin, who's obviously been able to show what he can do. Like you mentioned, Zamiah Vaughn, JT Broughton, Sione Vaki. Like these are guys that although they may not have as much experience as some of the guys ahead of them, they've got the know-how and the ability to be able to do it, and they've contributed in key roles. So it's kind of an interesting take, a few years removed from where Utah really didn't have depth. Where I remember years ago when somebody would get injured or something like that, it became like a game changer for the season, and I'd have to write about how this is going to change. Whereas now it's just kind of an afterthought, and it's kind of a different state of being. So it's a good place for Utah to be. Look, they have to scheme a little differently, maybe not a ton because they've got Thomas Yasmin and you've got different things, but I think they're going to be fine, and this isn't an area where Utah's necessarily worried.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like this team is preaching confidence still. I think one thing that's also interesting as it pertains to this matchup is obviously Penn State being a very talented team, but they have lost their two best games. Of course, those two college football playoff teams in this one. Both these teams kind of making it an interesting routes. When you think about Utah being a 3-loss team, they didn't even control their own destiny to get into the Pac-12 championship game. As I mentioned, Penn State not even playing in their conference championship and finding it out here. But I think the one thing that really excites a lot of people about this game is compared to last year was Ohio State. It was a letdown for them to be in the Rose Bowl. And it sounds crazy to stay out loud, but when you have two of the top 15 players in the NFL draft opting out for obvious reasons, and you have a couple guys opting out of this one too, you could just feel like it didn't mean as much to them. And they got the historic performances from Jackson Smith and Jigba and CJ Stroud too. But it really does feel like both teams and fan bases, this would mean so much to them. And is that the sense you get talking to the players and the coaches too, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for Utah especially, they want to come back and they want to win this, right? Like this the novelty's not off. They want to be able to get there. But even for Penn State, I mean, for all the winning that Penn State's done over their long, winning under Joe Pa and all that other stuff, like this is only their fifth Rose Bowl. So I mean, this is an experience for them, and it's an opportunity where two fan bases are going to be excited. You got two, football teams that are excited to play each other, and they both basically mirror each other in kind of their approach on how they do things. So it's a great opportunity to be able to have two teams that really want to be here. They're excited about where they're at and kind of what the possibilities could be with a win, right? Like, I mean, I think both programs can find various successes with a win. But I think you're seeing for at least a Utah team that this very much so is a business mindset, right? They want to come in here. They don't like, especially the defensive side, they don't like that everybody praises Ohio State for what they did and everything that way. They want to show what this Utah defense is about, and they don't want to be kind of put aside. So I'm intrigued to see it. Look, I mean, last year was an incredibly fun Rose Bowl to attend, and it was one of the greats of all time. But now you've got two teams that really want to be there. Smash, I can't even talk today. I'm sorry. Smash mouth football. Guys that want to be able to really show their physicality on both sides of the ball, and it's everything that you want to ask for, especially in a Rose Bowl game.
Yeah, it should be another great one. I think a very different game too. And we're going to talk about why this game should be very different in a moment. But Josh mentioned businesses, so we got to talk about our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Make sure you guys head over and add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. There are tons of great candidates ready to work for you guys. You can view their references, their resumes, and communicate back and forth with them easily on LinkedIn. There's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may apply. Josh, I think one of the really fun things about this matchup is the coaching matchup. When you look at the programs that both Kyle Whittingham and James Franklin have built, I think they're two of the more respected coaches in college football. I know there was a time even last year where we could have been getting this matchup a lot more because at some points there were rumors popping up that Franklin was in the running for the USC job. He shut that down quickly, stayed with Penn State at this point, and now we get this matchup regardless in a Rose Bowl. When you're looking at both of these coaches, what stands out to you the most? Because I think for me, it is how disciplined they are and how they've kind of been able to transform their programs in a new era of college football. When you've seen a lot of coaches who have been longer tenured struggle to adjust.
Yeah, I think they're similar in the sense that they bring a specific culture to their various their programs, right? Obviously, Penn State has more of the blue blood pedigree and being able to be at the top of college football, and so that naturally brings some cachet that Utah still hasn't obtained. But I think beyond all that, it's not necessarily the glitz and the glamour. You're not trying to be showy like a USC or an Alabama or different things that way. They're building a culture of guys that work hard. Everybody likes to say bring their lunch pail to work, right? Like I don't think it's fully that hard nosed and that, but I think it is that style where you want to be able to be coached up hard. You want to be able to be disciplined in a way that is encouraging and inviting, while still getting better on the field, right? Like you see two programs that really kind of do it the right way in terms of how you can just build camaraderie and chemistry and teamwork. So it's funny as you look at these two teams, they very much are similar, right? Like there is a lot of that stuff in the way that they build each other up and kind of their focus on different things. So it's interesting because neither coach really wants to steal the spotlight. They're both happy to let their players speak for them. So it's just kind of two good programs that are going to go after each other in a great game.
It should be a fantastic game, and it's because of the coaching matchup we have, and not just the head coaches too. When you're looking at the coordinator matchups, I think Morgan Scalley, if Utah fans know what a great defensive coordinator he is. I think he put on an absolute masterclass in the Pac-12 championship game with all the different pressures and looks he threw at the Trojans. That as soon as Caleb Williams got hurt, it was kind of like a shark. It was like they kind of smelled the blood in the water, and they just went full force after him. And then looking at offensively, what Mike Yorch has done with his Nittany Lions team too, the freshman running backs. Obviously, Sean Clifford has a lot of experience too. It's a very good offensive line, but I think the thing that excites me most about this matchup is to see the game plan that Morgan Scalley comes up with early on. And then after that, seeing how Penn State, well, just what they're able to do in terms of this is a team that we know they like to run the ball and they have an intimidating offensive line. In terms of just their Utah's front four versus Penn State's offensive line, I would give the advantage to Penn State. But then when you get in those third and long situations, all the craziness that Morgan Scalley is going to bring in terms of blitzes and pressure, I think is what really makes this one interesting. And it's going to be a lot of fun because we'll get to the defensive coordinator for the Nittany Lions in Manny Diaz in a second, and then talk about Andy Ludwig too. But specifically looking at Scally versus Urich, I think this is going to be a great matchup.
Yeah, this is one of those areas that Scally has a lot of confidence in, and that doesn't mean that Utah can't get beat here, right? But this is an area where Scally feels like he's seen all sorts of offenses out there. He's been able to, especially in the Pac-12, where there's a lot more high-powered offenses and different things that way that they're able to really focus in on what they need to do, right? And this is an area where Penn State can beat Utah in the sense of a run game, right? Except Utah traditionally tries to stop the run first, and then everything else comes after that. So I don't want to say that this necessarily, bodes well for Utah because these are two dynamic freshman running backs that are great. One is almost 1,000-yard rusher, the other, I believe it was 800 yards rushing. So they're both explosive. They can do a lot of great things. And it's really going to take Scally trying to figure out how to dial up pressures, trying to dial up blitzes, trying to be able to do that while still kind of keeping that sound assignment and not getting burned by an experienced quarterback who he's not necessarily the most flashy guy out there, right? Like you think of Sean Clifford as a consistent game manager type
Mhm.
quarterback, but that's exactly what can burn you in the sense that he can do some damage, especially if you are keying in too much on the run game or loading the box up too much. So, like you said, this is going to be an interesting dynamic for Morgan Scally, and he tends to find ways to be able to kind of scheme to whatever works, and I think that's going to be quite the fun matchup to be able to watch this year, especially with that offensive line that gels really well. There's not going to be necessarily a lot of breakdowns and in different things that way.
Yeah, led by Ole Fashuno. Excuse me if I mispronounced his name, the Penn State offensive lineman, all the guys they have over there. And this is going to be, we've talked about it a lot, but a very different Rose Bowl compared to last season. I feel like the defensive sides of the ball, in terms of the defensive coordinators, kind of have the edge in their matchup because I look at what Manny Diaz on the other side is going to be able to do. He's got guys like Abdul Carter at the inside linebacker position. And yes, no Joey Porter Jr., but still a very talented secondary and front seven. And I think Andy Ludwig is going to have to really be creative to beat a guy in Manny Diaz who does a lot of really clever things on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where Manny Diaz has always been known as kind of a defensive genius, right? Like
Mhm.
when he was at Miami as a head coach, his team was always really stout in defense. It was just their offense that couldn't do
Sure.
anything. And so this isn't an issue where Penn State is going to come in and they've got a guy that doesn't know what he's doing. No, they've got a really established guy who is very good as a defensive coordinator. But you also have, Andy Ludwig, who is experienced. He's been in the different conferences out there. He coached in the Big Ten, so he knows kind of how to scheme towards that. He's coached in the SEC. He's obviously been at Utah before. He's got a whole playbook that he can utilize, and he's tried to throw some of that out with Utah. So this is an area where Andy can really kind of show maybe more of the skill that Utah has over Penn State. I think all in all, I think they're pretty even, but I think when you've got somebody like Cam Rising who can kind of be more of a dynamic player, this gives Andy a lot more opportunities. And so I'm curious to see what he does. He too, in his own way, kind of seemed a little confident about his matchups. He said that even without Dalton Kincaid out there, they just have to change a little bit of the looks, but they feel confident in what they're going to be able to operate. So you know, I don't want to sit here and say that this confidence that this team and the coaches are bringing necessarily is going to translate to a win, but you're seeing a team that isn't rattled by a physical defense and rattled by what Penn State's able to bring. They see a lot of opportunities in this game, and we'll see on Monday whether that's the case or not. But I think right now they feel like they've got, I don't want to say an upper hand, but I think they've got a good blueprint for what they think can be success on Monday.
Well, college football is so crazy because you think about the last time we saw this Utah team, it was December 2nd, I want to say. And now we're going to see them literally a month later. They've had the opportunity and they found out, I believe it was the 4th, they found out they were playing Penn State. So they have had, these two teams had over a month to prepare for each other. So I think that's the risk is you talk about over preparing and over watching film and trying to figure out every minute detail. It's something Sean McVay mentioned in his first Super Bowl go around against the New England Patriots. What kind of different things do you think we'll see from both sides of the team that we haven't seen yet on the season? Or do you think they are going to really try to play their brand of football with maybe small wrinkles worked in? Because to me, that's what it feels like it's going to be. But I got to believe they have a couple things drawn up because look, they've had enough time if they want to watch every single snap that Penn State has played this year at least 3 times.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's going to be necessarily wholesale changes, right? I mean, that's hard for teams to do, and you want guys to feel comfortable in being out on the field, right? And as much as being out on the practice field for a month can kind of help, it completely changes once you get into the game. So there's going to definitely be some small wrinkles, and maybe there could be some bigger changes, but I doubt it. I think both teams are going to kind of stick to their game plan and kind of stick to what they know. But I think, like you mentioned, like this gives them an opportunity to say, okay, hey, maybe we were weak in this area, or we saw a weakness in this. Let's exploit it this way, and maybe a little different. So, look, this is one of those areas where it's more trying to keep players engaged into the game plan, and it's not that you're not, but when you're practicing for a month on the same things and the same practices, I asked Andy Ludwig that today, and he just said, "Look, like the same things that we're practicing today is exactly the same thing that we practiced last week. Like, there's nothing different." So, it's just keeping guys engaged and making sure that they're ready and making the necessary progress while still, trying to improve and trying to get that slight edge. So it'll be interesting. I don't think there's going to be a lot of change. Maybe you'll see some different looks, but based on my conversations with the coaches this week, I think it's going to be pretty similar to what you've seen this year.
One thing's for sure, both these teams are going to be extremely well prepared going into this matchup. We're going to come back in a moment and talk about some bold predictions we have for this game. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our friends of BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis all season long. You can get the latest odds, trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Pro football, there's still a couple of good college bowl games you guys can get in on the action of. Also, NBA, college basketball, NHL, they've got it all at BetOnline. So if you guys love sports podcasts, you can find those too. And of course, if you love getting in on always the fastest and easiest betting info, you can head to BetOnline, head to their website today, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, got to talk to you guys about our friends at UCCU. UCCU is offering a 15-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. Plus, you can jump up to an even higher rate of return anytime during the life of your certificate. Once again, it's a limited offer, and they have a variety of terms and options to match your specific needs. It's an incredible opportunity for people who want to build their savings. With a UCCU savings certificate, you simply make one deposit, then let your money grow and grow and grow with a fixed rate of return that's much higher than a standard savings account. So make sure you guys visit uccu.com to learn more or get a savings certificate today. Once again, it's a limited time offer, a 15-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. UCCU, love where you bank. So, Josh, coming back into this one, I think before we dive back into the game, I do got to ask you something quickly, because obviously there's been a lot of chatter around if this will be Cam Rising's final game. You were the one who asked him the question of, hey, is this going to be your final game, back when we were on Stanford, which feels like forever ago, in Utah's final home game. Talking to Cam this week, and maybe a couple of the other guys too, do you get the sense that it's going to be, or is he still trying to keep it coy and close to the vest?
He's definitely keeping it close to the vest, but based on kind of what I've heard, my understanding is that he probably will be coming back. Him and a bunch of other players will be running it back, so to speak, is kind of what they say. I asked Thomas Yasman today, and he said that he's leaning towards coming back after pretty much being a guarantee that he was leaving. But there's quite a bit of rumblings that there's going to be a lot of these guys back, and and this is a great opportunity for Utah to be able to get a win in the Rose Bowl, but then try to do it again next year and be highly ranked. So, look, if Cam comes back, I think that's kind of the linchpin in a lot of these guys actually deciding. Devon Bailey said he's now leaning, coming back. Mekhi Bernard's made his decision, but he hasn't announced it, he said. Braden Daniels is about the only one that's an early and player outside of Clark Phillips that will be leaving to the NFL, but he's got an opportunity to go get paid right now. So, look, I think this is an area where Cam's going to keep it close to the vest. He doesn't want to distract from the game. Maybe there's a chance that he sends out something on the day of the bowl game and just kind of throws it out there just to kind of get people excited. But I would imagine that this doesn't come until after the game. And if he does come back like I suspect that he is, I mean, I think this puts Utah in a prime position against some really good, talented quarterbacks in the Pac-12. And I'm interested to see it again, especially with Washington being able to play Utah next year. You get Michael Penix Jr. So I think it'll be a great opportunity. But if not, look, you've got some guys in the background that are going to be okay. You've got Nate Johnson, Bryson Barnes. So it'll be different, that's for sure. But I think if they can keep Cam, I think that absolutely gives Utah some instant credibility going into next year.
For sure. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out too, because obviously if Cam does end up coming back, he wants it to be coming off the success of a Rose Bowl, and that we don't have to, and then not having to do the whole revenge narrative and making it back there again. And that's what's going to be interesting to see how tonight's game plays out. So, Josh, it's bold predictions time. I've been going back and forth on trying to figure out a bold one all week, basically, because we've just been breaking down this game so much. I'll say this. Cam surprised. I think when a lot of people look back at the Rose Bowl last year, you think Cam threw for like 300 yards in that crazy game. He actually only threw for over 200. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game for Utah. And Cam was also very effective with his legs last year, which we should see more of him running the football since he has gotten healthier since the last time we saw him in the Pac-12 championship game. Something's going to be interesting to monitor, as his legs, whenever this team gets in those short yard situations, they turn to him as their best option to move the chains. Something to watch for in this one. But looking at it for Utah, I really think Cam's going to have an outstanding game. And I think he's going to be even better than he was last year. I think he's going to throw for 300 yards in this one. It's going to be a lower scoring game because we won't have the craziness of a Cubby return. Jackson Smith and Jigba won't be out there there going nuts in this one. So I really think Cam is going to have an outstanding game, and I think he's going to toss 3 touchdowns in this one and over 300 yards passing for Cam Rising against an even better defense.
That's a pretty bold claim, I will say, but I think it is attainable, right? Like I think it'll be harder, but he's got guys that he can do that. For me, I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to say that Sione Vaki gets an interception this year. I don't know if it'll be a pick six, but like I'm going to just predict that he gets an interception. He's been close. He's found a way to be able to insert himself in as more of a nickel, and he's found a way to see the field, and really the coaching staff has wanted him on the field because he's just been so dynamic. So I think he's going to position himself to kind of be that X factor on the team. You're going to have a consistent Zemiah Vaughn, JT Broughton, and all that, but I think you're going to get somebody like Sione Vaki who can easily be a difference maker, and that's going to be a key opportunity in this game, especially if you can come down with an interception against Sean Clifford.
He was a huge difference maker in the Pac-12 championship game. I think that's a great one. I absolutely love it. And I think Utah fans will too, if the Utes are able to ball out on both sides of the ball and get a gritty Rose Bowl win. Josh, if people are looking for a little bit of information before the game, where should they head over to?
Yeah, you can check us out on ksl.com. That's where I post most of my stuff. But for in-game stuff or things that are happening instantly, you can follow me on Twitter at j4ksl. I try to update people as much as possible and try to give you the sights and sounds of what's going on. So happy to interact and talk with you, and hopefully that I can provide some content that gives the fans kind of what they need is if they're at the game or not. So I look forward to it.
Well, we appreciate you doing exactly that for the past 25 minutes, Josh. Always great having you on. Best of luck with your coverage in Pasadena. Also want to thank all you guys for listening all week long. We've been rolling out pod after pod here on Locked On Utes in preparation for the granddaddy of them all, and it is finally here. It's the Utes taking on the Nittany Lions of Penn State. It's going to be an outstanding game, and we can't thank you enough for supporting this channel. Also, if you're in the market for a second listen every day, make sure you guys check out Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories in sports, the take of the day, the biggest game recaps. It's all available on Locked On Sports Today. Expert insight and analysis, breaking it all down, available on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcast. Big thanks to Josh Furlong once again for joining us on the show. Utah fans, have a great Monday and enjoy the Rose Bowl.